Hello, everybody. To those who are wondering what time I'm filming this, today is officially May 4th, 2020, aka Star Wars Day. So I've decided to take the time now to record a video of me talking about the Clone Wars. Now, for those of you who are wondering, what is the Clone Wars? Well, allow me to explain. You see, back around between 1999 and 2005, George Lucas had created a series of prequels to his original Star Wars trilogy. For the most part, the films garnered really terrible notices, with the exception being Revenge of the Sith, as it actually did get positive reviews. And even I liked it, because I do think the fact that, yes, there are a lot of problems with it, but this was probably the film that felt the closest to feeling like a legitimate Star Wars movie. And one thing that I actually do think the fact that the prequel trilogy did better over the sequel trilogy is that they clearly had a consistent feel and a clear idea of where they wanted to go. That was one thing that I had with a huge criticism with the Disney era of Star Wars movies, is that it very much felt like that they didn't really have an idea of where exactly they wanted to go. And even if they did, it very much felt like the fact that a lot of ideas kind of had to be changed around from movie to movie, because when Last Jedi ended up happening, people were like, crap, what are we going to do? Just fix something. Just add the fact that Palpatine's back now or something. But anyways, what I do think the fact that the prequels did better was that they definitely did have a consistent feel and tone. And I also want to mention that after the third one released in his prequel trilogy, Revenge of the Sith, was released, an animated series was officially announced called The Clone Wars. Now, technically, there had already been a Clone Wars animated series before, done by Genndy Tartakovsky, who did Samurai Jack. Except now, this Clone Wars came out in 2008. It was a CGI animated series that was going to air for Cartoon Network. In fact, George Lucas actually was so impressed by the animation that was used in the first few episodes. They was like, let's turn this into a movie. Let's release this as a movie. Which was kind of a mistake on George Lucas's part, if I'm being honest. Because, okay, so I'm going to get this out of the way before I get into the series. The movie takes place chronologically towards the beginning of the series. True, there were 2 episodes that came before it, chronologically speaking, but this was the first real thing of Clone Wars. Like, this is the introduction of Ahsoka Tano. This is where a lot of stuff from the Clone Wars that eventually overarcs across the rest of the series gets introduced, and it was really bad. Like, if they had just released it on TV, it probably would have been okay, but when it was released in this form, it definitely was not really well regarded, and it's probably considered to be the worst Star Wars movie. But yeah, the TV show couldn't be further from that. The television show is absolutely incredible, and in case you're wondering what the premise of it, the show is about, it's set between the 2 to 3 year gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. In fact, the final story arc of Clone Wars actually takes place literally around the exact same time as Revenge of the Sith. So, the plot follows Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi and several other Jedis as they try their best to face off against Count Dooku and his army of separatists. And alongside that are the separatist army of droids. To counteract this, the Republic, which was the big universal government at that point, had created a clone army with the template DNA for the clones being Jango Fett, the father of Boba Fett. Or rather, Boba Fett being a clone of Jango. Look, it's very confusing, and I do not want to get into it. But anyways, so the Republic decides, hey, let's use these clones to face off against the Separatist droids. And along the way, we get introduced to a new Padawan who was trained under Anakin Skywalker. This was where we get the introduction of Ahsoka Tano. Now, when she was introduced in the movie, her characterization really wasn't all that great. But as the series progresses, we see her go from a sort of smart alecky kind of annoying kid to a wise and mature leader that knows how to get stuff done. And honestly, Ahsoka is probably one of the best parts of Clone Wars, just seeing her progress and her come to these realizations as the series goes on. Like, she believes in the Jedi way, the fact that they should be protectors of the peace and other things like that. But after a story arc in season 5 in which she got framed for the wrongful murder of a potential accomplice in a bombing, that was when Ahsoka realized that after she had been let free and after she had been moved by another speech, she realized, the Jedis, they're not really doing what they were supposed to set out to do. Like, instead of acting like protectors of the peace, they're just acting like enforcers and warriors, and they're not doing what they do. So she leaves the Jedi Order, which is just something that not a lot of people do unless they have a really good reason. And Ahsoka has a really good reason. Also, I want to apologize real quick the fact that if the camera is shaking, I still have not yet gotten a new camera system yet, so I'm currently once again using handheld. But yeah, and there are actually a lot of really. But anyways, back on topic. Ahsoka is a really great character. And one other element that I really do like that they did do was that they brought back some other characters that weren't featured prominently as much. Like Darth Maul, who had presumably been killed at the end of Phantom Menace, was resurrected in a Season 4 story arc. And we further got to see him develop in Season 5 as a crime boss of the leader of Crimson Dawn. And that makes me think, now that makes sense. Because I remember I saw Solo: A Star Wars Story. I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw it when it came out on Netflix. When it came out on Netflix, I watched it and I'm like, wait, Darth Maul? He's alive? How is that possible? But now when I watch this, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And yeah, Darth Maul was really well done in the show. In fact, what I find really cool is that they got Ray Park, who actually performed the physical part of Darth Maul and did the stunts in the Phantom Menace. They got him back to do the final story arc, the Siege of Mandalore, and they mocapped him fighting off against Ahsoka, which was really cool and really well done. Now I do want to stress real quick the fact that even though the animation in the movie may not be all that great, as the series goes on, it actually does have some really decent animation. And something that I also want to mention real quick is that it actually does what the prequels somehow failed to do. They actually make Anakin Skywalker a competent and likable human being, which is something that is sorely lacking in the movies. But the way that they're able to portray Anakin in this is actually really well done, because he's a headstrong, hotshot young man who wants to be able to get stuff done, albeit not according to his own way instead of the Jedi way. And then there's Obi-Wan, who's always like, Anakin, don't do that. And then Anakin's like, nah, I'm gonna do it anyways. And Obi-Wan's like, some things truly do never change. However, of course, like many other television series, there are some story arcs that do drag and aren't really that interesting. Like, there are some story arcs that focus on the more political aspect of the war. Like, I think there was a story arc in season 5 in which Padme had to deal with some banker plan or something. I don't remember. There was also a series of episodes which focused on a group of younglings, like, trying to, like, find their lightsaber crystals and them, encountering, like, evil thugs or whatever. It's just kind of weak stuff. But when the show gets good, it gets really good. Like, I think one story arc that stands out to me is when Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Anakin, they're all taken away to this planet, and it serves as a physical embodiment of the Force. There's an old man who obviously represents just the Force as an existing being, but he has a daughter and a son, with the daughter representing the light and the son representing the dark. And after saving after saving Ahsoka and Obi-Wan from these monsters, Anakin's like, okay, we need to leave now. But the son's like, Yeah, you're not gonna be leaving so easily. He then kidnaps Ahsoka and then briefly corrupts her with the powers of the dark side and like brainwashes her into fighting against Anakin. And then eventually after they fix her, Anakin and Obi-Wan, they're trying to be able to figure out a way how to get off the planet, but then the sun shows Anakin a vision of what is to come if he does not join him. And that's when we see the events that play out in Revenge of the Sith. Anakin eventually we see Palpatine, we see Anakin force choke Padme like on Mustafar. We see Obi-Wan lightsaber fighting Anakin with him screaming, "You are my brother, Anakin!" And then Anakin's like, No, I can't." And then in the background, and you see Anakin's now in the this tiny little person in the foreground, and you see the Darth Vader helmet just form with smoke in the background. Like, it was a really well done story arc, and I think that was like the first story arc in which I'm like, yo, Clone Wars is dope. But yeah, and of course, so there's an interesting history behind this series. So originally, they did 5 seasons of episodes, and then eventually, around 2012, 2013, Disney officially purchased Lucasfilm from George Lucas for around $70 billion. Now, this meant that a lot of productions that were going on around that time period had to cease. One of those was Clone Wars. Even though they had a complete 6th season already finished and were intending to go on for at least 3 more, Disney's purchase of Lucasfilms ended up putting a cog in that wrench. And then Netflix actually picked up the distribution rights to the Clone Wars, had all the seasons available, including the 6th season and the movie available. And then StarWars.com was nice enough to state, yeah, to those of you who are wondering why some things are different in some episodes, well, that was because the idea was that it was going to be more anthology-like, but we decided to be nice, and we decided to give you a list of chronological order about what ends up happening in the series. And it's like, okay, well, that's certainly nice to know. And yeah, I did follow that chronological guide in case you're wondering, and if you are going to watch Clone Wars, if you have never seen it before, go chronological order. It makes a lot more sense otherwise. But anyways, so now obviously, you're probably wondering, well, did it ever get any kind of resolve? Did they ever get another season? Yes, because around Comic-Con 2018, because after years and years of people asking for them to bring back Clone Wars, even if it's for one more season, just to bring back the Clone Wars, they officially announced, alright, you guys want Clone Wars? We'll bring you more Clone Wars. And they announced a 7th season of Clone Wars would officially be heading to Disney+. And it wasn't until D23 last year that we found out. Oh, just to let you guys know, the first few episodes of Clone Wars will start airing on Disney Plus on February of 2020. And in that 7th season, we get 3 story arcs, each composed of 4 episodes. The first story arc focused on the Bad Batch, which was a group of defect clones, and how them, Anakin, and Rex... Oh, and I completely forgot to talk about Rex. Another element that I really did like about the series was that they made the clones their own individuals. Like, they gave them unique identities, their own unique personalities. Even though they all sound the same and look the same, they're all very different from one another. And that's actually really well done. And gotta give it to D. Bradley Baker for actually doing a really good job with the clones. I should also go on to mention all the other voice actors who had been involved, like Matt Lanter, who was the voice of Anakin Skywalker. No, his name is currently escaping me right now, but I've listed the voice of Obi-Wan he's been in so much other stuff, because I know he was in, I think he was Spider-Man at one point in time. I think he did the voice for Spider-Man during like a TV show or something. Maybe it was a video game. I don't know. But I do remember that he did do a ton of other stuff, and I have actually heard his... Wait, James Arnold Taylor. That was his name. Okay. He does a really good job portraying Obi-Wan. Ashley Eckstein, I think is her name. She does a really good job with Ahsoka. And I also gotta really give it to all the other individuals who they cast in other roles, like, for example, them casting Tom Kane as Yoda and also had him as the narrator for each episode, which was really cool. Because he's just got, like, a distinct voice. Like, he's got that voice that you could just instantly recognize. Like, you may not know the name, but you know the voice. But anyways, really just gotta give hands down to all the people involved. And I also want to mention real quick the fact that there's a lot of really cool things that are expanded upon here, like the villains, like General Grievous is actually expanded upon in here, and I think he's really well done. We get to see more of Count Dooku, which I think is really cool. We get to see more of Asajj Ventress, she was originally Count Dooku's assassin, but then after she eventually got betrayed by Dooku, she was like, I'm going to go back to my home planet and visit the Night Sisters, who are essentially just witches in the Star Wars lore, and like, I'm going to set up a trap. And this is where we get the introduction of Clancy Brown's character in the Clone Wars, who is the same species as Darth Maul and is actually his brother. In fact, he was even tasked by the head of the Night Sisters to actually go and find his brother, to go find Maul. And when he did, he just found him just speaking gibberish and had a robotic spider body. It wasn't until he took him to the Night Mother, whatever her name was, to get him fixed up that he was like, I remember everything. And I need to kill Obi-Wan Kenobi for doing this to me. Yeah, Sam Witwer as Darth Maul, he's really intimidating. And I also got to give it to the voice actor who actually did a really good job portraying the Emperor. I think he actually did a really good job. I'm forgetting what his name was for the first 5 seasons, but I know that Tim Curry voiced him in the 6th season, or for the 5th and 6th season, because the original voice actor who portrayed Palpatine in this series actually died, which is rather unfortunate. But anyways, so I completely got sidetracked because I need to remind you guys of, the people who played the people here, the cast here. So anyways, the first 4 arcs of Season 7 talk about, Rex trying to find Eka, who was part of the Domino Squad. The next 4 episodes cover Ahsoka and what she was up to. And then the final 4 episodes, episodes 9, 10, 11, and 12, the best episodes out of the entire series, I think, was the Siege of Mandalore. Because they'd established that when Darth Maul came back, he teamed up with Pre Vizsla. And in case you're wondering who Pre Vizsla is, he's voiced by Jon Favreau, who did The Mandalorian. He was the leader of Death Watch, which was a terrorist organization on Mandalore. Maul teamed up with him. They overtook Mandalore. And then eventually, Maul killed Pre Vizsla. And I'm pretty sure he killed him with his own Darksaber, which was forged by the first Mandalorian Jedi. And it was the exact same thing, the fact that Giancarlo Esposito's Moff Gideon had at the end of the first season of Mandalorian. Man, I'm realizing the fact that apparently a lot of this ties into The Mandalorian. And that's because Dave Filoni, who helped work on The Mandalorian, helped to create this. Because he was he was the supervising director on this series and helped to co-create it with George Lucas, which is really cool. But anyways, the Siege of Mandalore is amazing because the point of Clone Wars is that it's supposed to fill in what happened in between that time period between Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones. Well, what's interesting about Siege of Mandalore is that it takes place around the exact same time as Revenge of the Sith. So in case you were wondering, during Revenge of the Sith, because when Clone Wars came out afterwards, you're probably thinking, whatever happened to Ahsoka, Maul, or Rex? This answers that question because literally, as soon as Ahsoka goes off to do her own mission and goes to Mandalore to stop Maul, around that time, that's when Revenge of the Sith begins. Because Anakin goes off to, he's helping Ahsoka out, giving her an army that she needs. She even has Rex there too. And then eventually Anakin gives Ahsoka her lightsabers with some added adjustments. And then Obi-Wan's like, I hate to interrupt and be the bearer of bad news, but it appears the Chancellor has been taken by Counts Dooku and General Grievous. And so Anakin and Obi-Wan run off to try and stop General Grievous, And that's where we enter into Revenge of the Sith, and that's with the giant space battle. And around the same time, we have Ahsoka, Rex, and Ahsoka's own army to literally fight off against Maul. And Maul's like, "You truly have no idea what Sidious is up to." And she's like, "Who is Darth Sidious?" And he's like, my former master. And he's grooming Anakin Skywalker to be his next apprentice. And you have no idea what is about to happen." And after an incredible fight between Ahsoka and Darth Maul, which, once again, I mentioned the mocap between Ray Park as Darth Maul, and I'm forgetting what her name was who did Ahsoka, when they do capture Maul, and he's like, "You don't understand! You're all going to die!" And then we find out what he means by we get to episode 11, because Rex is like, okay, now that we got Maul taken, I gotta answer this real quick, because we're getting some new orders from the Chancellor. And then we hear that fateful command from Palpatine: "Execute Order 66. All the clones turn. And while this is happening, Ahsoka gets a vision of Anakin murdering Mace Windu and joining Palpatine. And now Ahsoka's currently on her own as she's currently fighting off against all these clone troopers that have just suddenly turned against her. In fact, desperate times call for desperate measures. She frees Maul and is like, "Look, I'm not siding with you. I still think the fact that what you did was very wrong, but I need you to cause a diversion so I can get out of here and get to Captain Rex." And Maul's like, "Fine, I shall do so." And Maul in that hallway fighting off all those clone troopers by himself is probably the coolest sequence to showcase the power of the Sith alongside Darth Vader's own hallway scene in Rogue One. And then eventually Ahsoka finds Rex, knocks him out, and with the help of some droids and the Force, she finds the inhibitor chip that caused Rex and all the other clones to turn against them. She turns off Rex's inhibitor chip, and now Rex is doing fine now. But Rex is like, "I hate to burst your bubble, Commander Tano, but all the other clones have turned against us. What are we going to do?" And the final episode, episode 12, the final episode of Clone Wars ever, focuses on Ahsoka and Rex trying to figure out, okay, how on earth do we get out of here? And then they figure out a way about how to escape, but Maul ends up destroying the hyperdrive jump because they were literally in hyperdrive when this happened. He destroys it, and now the ship ends up literally careening towards a moon. And Ahsoka and Rex are like, "We gotta get off of this ship before it crashes down." And then, Maul being the Maul, he ends up taking the ship that they were planning on using. And Rex and Ahsoka, literally as they're falling, find another ship and get out of there. But before they leave the moon, they bury all the dead clone troopers that suffered. And even had they even did the thing for the soldiers in which they had little sticks up and put their helmets on top of them to honor them. And then we see Ahsoka and Rex look on upon this. And then, eventually we cut to several years later. The moon is now covered in snow. The Empire is the elite force in the galaxy. There's stormtroopers everywhere. And on that moon is Darth Vader. And when Vader gets there, he finds the old ship that Ahsoka was on. And then in the snow, he sees something. He sees something glisten. So he picks it up and finds Ahsoka's old lightsaber. Turns it on, looks at it for a little bit, turns it off, pockets it, stares up into the sky, knowing that Ahsoka's still alive out there, because this isn't the last time we see Ahsoka Tano, who she did eventually get featured in Star Wars Rebels, which was the first ever animated series that Disney did under the Star Wars name. But anyways, we see Vader look up upon the stars and then just walk away. And the final shot of the Clone Wars is Darth Vader walking away from an old clone trooper helmet with Vader present in the visor. And you just see the image just become more faded and faded as the helmet is covered in snow. And that brings us to the end of the Clone Wars. Man, that was an incredible series. So overall, the Clone Wars, even when it has its misses, when it hits, it absolutely just hit so much better than all the other prequels. This was what the prequels should have strived to have been like, particularly when it came to the characterizations like people like Anakin Skywalker, for example. And it even introduced new characters like Ahsoka that have become fan favorites in the lore. So, with incredible animation, action sequences, well-written characters, actual emotional stakes, The Clone Wars is probably one of the best animated series I have seen, and probably the best television show that Star Wars has ever produced. That, and, well, maybe Mandalorian might be a little bit better, but overall, I really like Clone Wars, and so I'm going to give the Clone Wars a 9 out of 10. I think it is better than the prequels, no doubt. I think it's better than a lot of the other stuff that, has been recently coming out with Star Wars. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed me just talking about the Clone Wars. Stay tuned next time for when I actually do cover My Hero Academia, because in case you didn't know, I'm going to be covering My Hero Academia next video. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and may the Force be with you always.